Have you ever heard a voice so unusual that it stays in your head forever? Not because it's beautiful, but because it's strange. So strange that once you hear it, you can't forget it. During Hollywood's golden age, filled with polished accents and perfect singing voices, one of the most unforgettable sounds didn't belong to a glamorous star or leading man. It came from a little boy whose voice resembled a bullfrog's croak. His name was Billy Laughlin, though to the world he was simply Froggy. Froggy became a standout in our gang, later known as the Little Rascals. For kids in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, he was Saturday morning magic. With his round glasses, funny expressions, and that bizarre guttural voice, he became an icon of mischief. A child with a built-in sound effect, Froggy could steal a scene with one gravelly word. But behind the laughs and the croak was a story of fleeting fame, lost innocence, and a tragedy that struck long before adulthood. We remember the character, we remember the voice. What we often forget is the boy, Billy Laughlin, who was just stepping into a new life when it was stolen in an instant. His story is not about Hollywood happy endings, but about heartbreak and a peculiar voice silenced too soon. It leaves us with one question: what happens when the laughter stops? The world that made Froggy. To understand Froggy's rise, picture America in the early 1940s. The nation was healing from the Great Depression and bracing for war. Families lived with uncertainty, and theaters offered a much-needed escape. For a nickel or dime, you could leave behind the grim headlines and enter another world. For children, one of the most reliable escapes was our gang, the brainchild of producer Hal Roach. Roach's idea was simple but revolutionary: put real, unpolished kids on screen and let them be themselves. These weren't polished child stars like Shirley Temple. They were scrappy, messy, relatable. They built go-karts, got into trouble, and reflected real childhood. By 1940, the series had been sold to MGM, Hollywood's most powerful studio. MGM polished the formula, adding more scripted structure, but our gang still needed fresh energy. With older stars like Spanky McFarland and Alfalfa aging out, MGM searched for new quirks and characters. They found their answer in a boy from California with an unforgettable voice. Billy Laughlin becomes Froggy. William Robert Laughlin was born July 5, 1932, in San Gabriel, California. A normal boy from a regular family, Billy had no ambitions of fame. But he had something extraordinary: his voice. Legend says it developed after a tonsillectomy, though others claim he always had a raspy tone that he exaggerated for fun. Whatever the cause, it was bizarre and unforgettable. When an MGM talent scout heard him, an audition was arranged. Imagine the scene. An 8-year-old boy steps onto a massive MGM soundstage, asked to speak before powerful producers. Out comes that croak, a sound so strange it froze everyone. Director George Sidney was captivated. Billy was hired almost immediately and given the name Froggy. Dressed in glasses and an oversized coat, Froggy was the gang's gloomy intellectual, the kid who always croaked warnings while the others schemed. His slow double takes and bug-eyed stares became his trademarks. The humor came from contrast: a small boy with the voice of a grumpy old man. It was comedy gold. From 1940 to 1944, Billy appeared in 29 Our Gang shorts, more than many of the earlier, more famous cast members. On set, the kids attended school between filming, creating a strange balance of childhood and professionalism. Co-stars recalled Billy as gentle and shy, the opposite of Froggy's gloom. He was sweet, quiet, and kind-hearted, just a boy with a freakish gift that turned him into a star. The weight of a peculiar gift. Billy's voice brought him fame, but it also defined him completely. In interviews, he spoke of it clinically, as if it were something he carried rather than something he was. Imagine the psychology of being known entirely for a single strange trait. It was both his ticket to success and his prison. One story illustrates this divide. During filming, a scene required Froggy to cry, but Billy couldn't shed tears on cue. To help, the crew brought in his mother to gently scold him until he broke down. The audience saw Froggy's tears, but in truth, it was Billy's discomfort. It was always a blur, the line between child and character never fully clear. His most famous performance came in the 1943 patriotic short Benjamin Franklin, Jr. In it, Froggy croaked out words from the Declaration of Independence. The moment was meant for laughs, but it carried unexpected weight, patriotic sincerity wrapped in absurdity. It captured the spirit of wartime America and made Froggy unforgettable. But by 1944, the world was changing. The war neared its end, and after 22 years, MGM closed the Our Gang series. Billy was 12 years old. The studio gates closed behind him, and he was left to answer a difficult question. What happens to a child star when the spotlight fades? Life beyond Froggy. The transition from fame to normal life is brutal for child stars. For Billy, it was even harder. His career had depended entirely on his voice, and as puberty set in, the croak disappeared. Without the quirk, Froggy was gone. Billy was just Billy again. He returned to public school, made friends, and tried to live as a regular teen in post-war America. He played sports, enjoyed his freedom, and fell in love with motor scooters, a symbol of youth and independence. He even delivered newspapers, a job far removed from Hollywood sets. There's a touching story, though unconfirmed, that Billy once told a friend he was glad his voice was changing. He didn't want to be Froggy forever. He wanted to be Bill. For once, he was defining himself not by a voice, but by his own choices. It wasn't a story of bitterness, but of hope. Billy was ready for a new chapter. The crash. August 31, 1948, was a warm summer day, just weeks after Billy's 16th birthday. That afternoon, he rode his motor scooter delivering newspapers with his friend John Preston on the back. As they traveled through La Puente, California, a truck suddenly made a sharp U-turn in front of them. There was no time to react. The scooter slammed into the truck's side. Billy was thrown forward, suffering devastating injuries. John was tossed clear and survived, though badly hurt. Billy was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. At just 16, William "Billy" Laughlin was gone. The truck driver was briefly held on suspicion of manslaughter but later released. The charges dropped. Records don't explain why. Was it ruled a tragic accident or a failure of justice? The silence around his death is haunting. Forgotten yet remembered. Billy was buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California. By then, his fellow Rascals were scattered, growing into adulthood. The news barely made headlines. In 1948, without constant media coverage, his death slipped quietly into history. But on screen, Froggy lived on. Reruns of The Little Rascals introduced him to new generations. Kids in the 50s and 60s still laughed at his double takes and croaky warnings, unaware that the boy behind them had died years earlier. Unlike some other Rascal tragedies like Alfalfa's violent death or Weezer's fatal crash, Billy's story is often overlooked. Maybe because his fame had faded, or because the randomness of his death doesn't fit a dramatic Hollywood downfall. But Froggy endured. His voice echoed through decades, cementing him as a pop culture icon. The lesson of Froggy. Billy's story is bittersweet. He wasn't destroyed by fame, nor did he spiral into tragedy. He was simply a boy who found sudden stardom through a strange gift, left it behind, and began to build a new life, until fate intervened. Perhaps that's the lesson. Life is fragile, unpredictable, and often unfair. The Rascal kids who brought so much joy often carried tragedy of their own. Billy's story reminds us that behind every laugh was a real child, not just a character. He remains frozen on film, forever the boy with the bullfrog voice. But remembering him means remembering not just Froggy, but Billy Laughlin, the sweet, shy kid from San Gabriel who brought joy to millions, and whose life ended before it could truly begin. The laughter he gave us was real, so was the tragedy, and the truest way to honor him is to hold both in memory.